Greater Sandton and beyond. Get ready for the Sandton Times Hour
with your host,
Alexander.
Ladies and gentlemen, everyone in between and beyond, welcome to the Sandton Times Hour. It's edition 175. It's week 38 of 2024. And of course, the Sandton Times Hour is always available on all leading digital platforms wherever you are in the world. Pick your podcast platform and subscribe and be part of the Sandton Times Hour Nation. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can do so by sending through your questions, your comments, your feedback on email, editor@sandtontimes.co.za, on social media @Sandton Times, and of course on the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. And a very special welcome to everyone listening for the very first time, as well as our regular listeners in Johannesburg and Pretoria, across South Africa, everywhere and anywhere else in the world. If it's online or on air, wherever you are, I'm happy to report that all is well in Sandton land. And I'm joined by my trusty sidekick, Vincenzo, behind the mixing desk once more. And it's been quite the week in South Africa, Vincenzo. I think there's never a dull week in South Africa. And the warmer temperatures definitely help make it that much, more pleasant. Because cold weather and unpleasant weeks don't always go together very well. But if there's a bit of sunshine, always makes it a little bit crisper. By the way, before I forget, I went to go see the Ndlovu Youth Choir, and they were absolutely incredible. If I tell you, I was somewhere in between crying, smiling, laughing for, 2 hours? 90 minutes with a bit of a break in between. It was sensational. I can highly recommend to you, when they are back in Johannesburg, do yourself a favor, buy yourself a ticket. I think it's 400 Rand or something to go see them. I see they're going overseas to Carnegie Hall. You'll be paying double, if not triple, that amount if you wanted to go see them in New York. Never mind flying to New York. World class. I mean, that Teatro Theatre was actually too small for this performance. What a national asset the Ndlovu Youth Choir is. And all I can say is, please, just do yourself a favor. Go and see them, and I really do hope that they fill up a bigger and greater venue next time they're here. I'd like to see them fill out the Sunbet Arena or whatever else we've got, because they are really just the most incredible, exciting choir to watch and perform. If you've never seen Nessun Dorma, that famous operatic song that's been attributed obviously to football and all kinds of other sort of sporting moments in Zulu, well, let me tell you, you've got something coming your way. Ndlovu Youth Choir. Make a note. Next time they're around, go see them. As mentioned last week, I'm heading off to Italy this week, and I'll be back with you in early October. I'm there for a bit of work. Going to go see a ship coming out of the shipyards, and I'm going to also try and see if we can do a couple of other content pieces while I'm there. But the weekly show continues, and I'll be leaving you with some great content and some popular favorites. So it's the same time, same place as always. Nothing changes. But if you're keen to follow what's going on in Italy, make sure you get onto the Instagram and the social media platforms, and I'll try and keep you all in the loop on what's happening and what's going down. So what are we talking about this week? Who are we talking to this week? Ever thought of having your house or property featured in a movie or a music video or a TV commercial? Well, in a bit, I'll be catching up with someone who will tell you just how you can do that, and also how you can make some money doing this. All the details up in a bit. Then she's our former Miss Universe, and she popped into Sandton to launch her new book, and I had a chance to reconnect with her, and I'll be sharing that interview with you, so stay listening for that. And finally, he has been making headlines this entire week with his video around the state of public healthcare. Well, he's currently undergoing treatment in a hospital in Sandton, so I'll be connecting with him just to check in, see how things are going, and to catch up on the week that has been. All this and more in the next hour.
Show some love.
subscribe, share,
Leave a review and rating for the Sandton Times Hour.
on your favorite podcast app now.
Online, on air.
Anywhere, anytime.
This is the Sandton Times Hour.
So Amazing Spaces is a leading South African company that specializes in connecting global film crews with exclusive properties this is something that a lot of people don't think about. You buy your house or you buy a rental property, you think I'm going to rent it out to some tenants and that's the way I'm going to make money, or I'm going to buy a house and it's just going to appreciate hopefully, and one day I'm going to sell it. And that's how I'm going to make money. But there's other ways you can turn your property into money, and that's what my next guest is going to talk to me about. They've got 2 decades of industry experience, and they've got a diverse portfolio of rare designer homes, but also expansive private farms, and so many more. So Amazing Spaces founder Julia Finnis-Bedford joins me on the line. And Julia, it's good to have you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you. Excited to be here. Thanks.
So, Julia, let's quickly contextualize this for everybody. If I understand this correctly, what your company does is you go out and you source individuals' homes, properties, and put them into a catalog of some sort. And if I'm an international film director or a producer, or I'm making a music video or a TV commercial or something, I can come to you and you will find me the place that I need, and then broker a deal between the property owner and this crew to come and shoot a movie in my kitchen.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
You nailed it.
But that's quite tremendous. I mean, that obviously, on the one hand, sounds absolutely extraordinary. But what are we talking about here in terms of a return for the person who owns the property? I mean, what are people earning on renting out their property?
Well, I'd love to answer that straight off. But first I'm going to say that there's obviously a little bit of disruption involved, and people need to be prepared to put up with disruption. But the amazing thing is that most of our homeowners are very well-to-do, affluent people with beautiful homes, some not so beautiful, but these are smart people who are looking, and those are also in demand, by the way.
Is that for horror movies?
Yeah, these are smart people who understand, return on investment. And, that traditionally a property is something that sucks money, and you may, if you're lucky, get a return when you sell. But what a great way to earn some money while you get to still live in it, enjoy it. For the most part, a shoot will take a day or a few days, but for the most part, you wake up in your house, you go to sleep in your house, and while you're away at work, you're earning some money. So what a great way to do that. But to answer your question, it depends where the house is. If we're talking specifically to the Joburg market, or perhaps if you've got a property in Cape Town, it does depend on the area that it's in, the value of the property all plays a role, and what the demand is. So is it a little white clapboard beach house on the beach? That's going to be obviously in quite high demand. Or if it's a little farmhouse out in the middle of nowhere, that might not get the same kind of rate. And also depending on whether it's a small still shoot, because we do a lot of fashion photography, a lot of clients come from abroad and shoot their catalogs here. Or we do, anything down to superbalist, sissy boy, local choreographed shoots. So it could be a local shoot. And rates can be anything from sort of 10 or 15,000 Rand a day up to sort of 40, 50, 60,000 Rand a day. So it just depends what's the nature of the shoot.
So, it sounds like it's really worthwhile. It's not like you're going to just give me sort of like, a gift voucher to go to my local mall and have a meal. It sounds like you're getting some good money. And like you said, it also depends on the inconvenience it might cause, because in some instances it might go on for a few days. I might have to live in the living room for a bit. In some instances it might be a quick thing. It's just a few models in your garden doing some stuff and it's over in a few hours. Some of these properties are occupied, but some of these are also empty. They just belong to someone who lives overseas and they're happy to make it available whenever.
We don't have a lot of those, interestingly, but we do have some, mainly in Cape Town, actually, where people have bought or are swallows. And of course, for the property to earn money while they're not there makes perfect sense. And then others where we've had bigger shows, like we do some reality shows where they'll take over the location for sort of 3 or 4 months. Then if the owner lives in the home, we'll negotiate to either relocate him, and rent somewhere elsewhere for the owner, or if they're not around anyway, obviously the rate just depends on the fact that they're taking over the house completely versus in at 6 a.m. and out by 8 p.m. type of scenario.
But it's also a little bit of a luck of the draw, right? I shouldn't go out and go buy a farm in Franschhoek now, hoping that you're going to sort of farm it out for the next 12 months to all in sundry, and I'm going to be making my money back.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't buy a property based on this.
Okay, just to check.
There are trends. We've had some of our properties almost since we started, as we've been going for 25 years. So A lot of the trends are based on what's happening in fashion. This year it could be looking for very, androgynous type spaces because the female, fashion trend is suits and what have you. And then next year's bohemian, then they're looking for a little wooden hut in the middle of a field, so you never really know what's happening. And fashion plays a huge role in what's going to be in demand in the coming season. But having said that, there are some key ingredients that always work well. Great light, big spaces, wooden floors, lots of parking obviously is a bonus. So there are ingredients that work consistently, but I wouldn't buy a property based on this income. This is just a nice to have.
I mean, from my time in television, I also remember, and sometimes when people watch like sitcoms or they watch soapies, they'll see sort of drama unfold in a living room. But before it cuts to that scene, there's generally like an outside shot of some palatial residence or maybe just a suburban home. And the two are not linked up. I mean, the one is basically a real house in suburbs of Johannesburg. The other one's happening in a studio somewhere completely different under controlled circumstances. But those people whose house is being filmed or being used, those people are being paid some sort of royalty or some sort of copyright fee to have their house featured in the soapie.
Those are what we call establishing shots. You're right on it. I can tell you've been in the industry before. So yes, we'll pay a homeowner just to do the shot of the outside of his house. And then you're right, it cuts to a scene on the inside, and very often it's not the same location. But they don't get royalties. We pay for the day, and then they get the use of the location for that shot. If we were to go into the royalty conversation, we'd open up a whole can of worms in terms of fees in the industry, but they will pay for the day to shoot that shot, yeah.
But it's potentially also a way that you could sort of make some money out of your property, even though maybe not as much as giving up your whole house.
Oh, 100%. I mean, we do, in fact, Cape Town's very popular for, and in fact, I think we've done some in Joburg as well, for car shoots. So very often a car shoot is only about the driveway and the entrance. Just a car pulling up on the outside. They don't even have to go inside the house. It is literally, I mean, we choose locations based on the fact that it would be a good car shoot location.
Well, I'm just going to add in there as well is that the car doesn't get to stay with the property afterwards. That's not included in the deal. You just get the money and they get to shoot there. But I'm chatting to Amazing Spaces founder Julia Finnis-Bedford. We're talking about turning your space into a bit of a Hollywood, or is it a TV commercial hub? Maybe you can make some money out of it. Maybe you don't, depending on what the trend is. We're going to take a quick break and more of this conversation right after the break. Stay right where you are.
The best of Sandton and beyond.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
I'm picking up on my chat with Amazing Spaces founder Julia Finnis-Bedford, chatting all things television and movie production and how your house could potentially be part of that. Julia, tell us a little bit more about Amazing Spaces and how do you begin to assess if a house is suitable for a potential shoot? I mean, you mentioned parking's a good thing, a couple of cool features. It all depends on what the production needs.
Exactly. We're very fortunate in that we get emails all the time, people wanting to have their shoots, considered as a location. And luckily, it's very good dinner party talk. You're going to mention that you had a famous person in your house the previous day. So we get recommend. Our word of mouth is our biggest ally in this industry, and we're very fortunate to be able to turn a lot of them down. So we're very honest about what we know is going to work based on some of those ingredients that I mentioned to you. Again, we know trends, and we're always looking for unusual spaces. So architecturally unusual, incredible views. There are sometimes things that we're short of, like commercial offices. Funny enough, we didn't have enough of those recently. You think about it, you see scenes in a movie with a call center, a very cute, cool call center. We didn't have enough call centers. When you start looking at a movie or a commercial or anything from a location perspective, you start really looking at all the space and think, oh wow, they're shooting in anything from a tiny coffee shop to a beach house to a palatial residence to an airport. I mean, for example, the CTICC in Cape Town is used all the time as a fake airport. We make things work, but they're not always airports or coffee shops. We just make them work.
It's very interesting. I remember shooting a commercial for an Italian satellite television company in downtown Johannesburg, and literally an entire street was converted into an Italian street with signage, turning the traffic lights around. I mean, they turned a sort of very arbitrary basement into a subway entrance and exit. It's quite amazing what you can do with spaces. Now, tell me a little bit more about the sort of the liability for the owner, because I mean, I can already see people saying, this sounds like a great idea, but what about the insurance? What about, people trudging through my house? And we know these productions come with a lot of equipment, a lot of lighting. Is there something that could break? Whose responsibility is it? How does all of that work?
Yeah, that's a great question, Alex, because I think that's one of the questions that always comes up with a potential location. What happens when I've got 70 people in my house? And that's really where we kick in a big way. Aside from marketing the space to the industry, we ensure that we know exactly who we're working with. We've been in this industry a long time, so we know who all the producers are. If somebody pops up that we don't know, we always do the checks and make sure the insurance or all the documentation is in place. But essentially, we make sure that they are insured. And anything that happens on set in your home that needs to be fixed afterwards, we make sure it gets fixed. But the important thing is make sure they have insurance and then facilitate afterwards that everything gets fixed. And I'd love to make it light and fluffy and tell you that nothing ever happens on location. Of course, they're going to look after it. Damages never happen. They do. Of course, they do. The great thing is that nowadays, because the finance guys are controlling the budgets and not the creative guys, they're very careful about whether they need to come back and fix your house. So, we make sure, if they drive over your plants and they damage your plants, we get the plants replaced, or, in your living room, we sort out that it gets painted, all those kinds of things. That's really where we added extra real value in terms of representing these locations, is making sure we know who's on set and that your property is looked after.
And I suppose that also is the case the other way around. So in case Martin Scorsese is listening to this, or Steven Spielberg, and they're saying, I'm looking for a location, then it's not just going to go into sort of like Gumtree or Airbnb and sort of look up a really cool looking house and saying, I'm going to book that for the weekend and start shooting my feature film in some unknowing person's living room.
Actually, that's how it started. I used to be a freelance producer in the industry, and that was a very long time ago. I was young then, but there was no internet, funny enough, then. That's how long ago it was. But the way we scouted locations was literally knocking on doors, can we shoot in your home? So there was nobody, providing locations to the industry on a professional platform, and also nobody protecting the homeowner. So, they'd knock on your door, sounds amazing, I'm going to give you this much money. Or then they break things, they shoot overtime, all of that stuff. A lot more happened long ago. It's much better now. The producers send us the brief or the storyboard of what they're looking for, and we'll present them a package of 10 or more locations that are going to suit that brief, so that they know that this is whittled down to the best possible options for them. And that comes with us having prepped the owners of those locations exactly what to expect when they have a shoot in their home. So when those 70 people arrive, they're not shocked. And communication is key. Like, as long as you're communicating and they know exactly where they stand, then it's going to run smoothly. So that's really one of the most important parts of it.
What are some of the most notable projects that many people will know that have been shot in South Africa that you wouldn't even think would have been on our shores?
Oh, there's so many to mention, but we've done some big movies. We more recently did the Love Island British reality TV show, which was a huge 4-month booking in Cape Town. Famous producers, I can't even think all the names now, but Miley Cyrus has shot down. There's so many. We have famous actors here all the time, and funny stories, where we'll send them for a recce on the location. The location owner kind of opens the door, and there's a famous person saying, they're like, why didn't you warn me? And that's where the dinner party talk comes in, so that I had Miley Cyrus here, or Clint Eastwood was directing a movie recently, and we sent him to the location. The homeowner was like, oh my gosh, I opened my front door and there was Clint Eastwood, so we get a lot of them. And luckily, because of the price difference so they come all the way from the US to shoot in our country, because of course the rand is so favorable for them, and we've got this huge diversity of locations, which is so attractive for them.
Well, my final question is, have you had any homeowners not just negotiate a part for their house in the movie, but have they also been asked to feature in a movie?
Funny enough, we have had once or twice where they'll use the kids in a shoot, but more often the pets. The pets get used in the shoot, so the cat or the dog or whatever. Not so often the actual owners, but it does happen. But more normally as an extra in the background, not the key shot.
A cameo appearance by the owner. Fantastic. Well, Amazing Spaces founder Julia Finnis-Bedford providing us with a starting point. So if you've ever imagined your house could be starring on the big screen, or maybe even your Labrador, well, Julia might be the person to speak to, and we'll put up all the details on the website, on the Sandton Times, and you can do some further reading and click on some of the links and find out. Maybe there's a house that you've got here in Johannesburg and Sandton that could be the next big thing. Let's see. Get in touch with Julia. And Julia, it's been so great having you on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thanks, Alex.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
As we get into the second half of the Sandton Times Hour, don't forget that if you caught something intriguing during the show but missed some of the details, don't worry, we're putting them up on www.sandtontimes.co.za this week, and you can explore those show notes and get a breakdown of all the highlights, what happened this week, some further reading, some links, whatever it is that you need. And as mentioned in the beginning of the show, if you want to stay up to date with all that's going on in the Sandton Times world, then make sure that you connect on social media at Sandton Times on whichever platform you prefer. And it's good to hear from you and see you there. Philanthropist, entrepreneur, speaker, model, and Miss Universe 2017, Demi-Leigh Tebow released her debut book, A Crown That Lasts, You're Not Your Label, this past week in Sandton. She was joined by former Miss South Africa Melinda Bam in conversation at the Exclusive Books in Sandton City. And I had a chance to reconnect with Demi-Leigh, and we had a quick chat, and I asked her what it was like to be back in South Africa.
South Africa will always be home. Don't ever mistake that. It will always be home, and my family's still here. So I don't want to say I visit, but I spend as much time as possible in South Africa. So
you've had an incredible journey since winning Miss Universe, and you're also now working with your husband Tim Tebow at the Tim Tebow Foundation. How's your life evolved since your pageant days?
I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned is that the things that we achieve in our life, all the, high moments, the winning moments, are all a vessel that we get to use to live out our purpose. It's not our purpose itself. Winning that Miss Universe title, it might have seemed like such a big part of my life's purpose or calling. Even, thinking about marriage and a relationship, all the things that accumulate throughout our life, I think it's really a vessel to live out our purpose. And that's one of the greatest things I've learned in the last few years, and such a big part of what my new book, A Crown That Lasts, is based on.
Your book, and obviously your life at the moment, is very much about faith and how it guides your life. How has it played a role in your personal and professional journey?
I think one thing that one of the biggest mistakes I've made is to root my identity in something that was temporary. And, perhaps your viewers might not relate to a physical crown like the one I wore. Maybe that's a job, maybe that's a career path, maybe that is a title, a position, a raise possibly. And, what happens with our identity when that thing that we rooted it in is no longer there? That was something that I had to come to a realization with. And personally, I had to realize if I want to have a sustainable, rock solid identity for the rest of my life, I'm going to have to root it in something that's bigger than myself, something that is always trustworthy, and something that is never changing. And for me personally, that has been my faith.
A lot of people would say working with your partner is taking a gamble. Some people say it works, sometimes it doesn't. In your case, what's it like working alongside your husband, Tim? And you're doing a lot of charitable ventures. And how do you make sure that you balance that personal and professional life? Like, when does the professional chat end and the personal conversation start at home?
I think from a career perspective, we do have a lot of our careers that align in a big way, which is really fun because he gets to be a sounding board to me. He's one of my greatest cheerleaders, which I'm so thankful for. The work that we do through the Tim Tebow Foundation is more of a life's purpose and a calling than it is a job in any way. It's something that we wake up to every single day, grateful to be a part of, grateful to move forward. The mission of the Tim Tebow Foundation is to fight for people in their deepest, darkest hour of need, and to bring faith, hope, and love to those that need it most. And so, we always say we don't live on our timeline, we live on the people's timeline who we get to serve.
You're out in South Africa to highlight your new book. It's called A Crown That Lasts. You've touched on it already, and it offers also a very vulnerable look into your personal journey. What inspired you to share these setbacks and struggles? Because that's not something that people generally like to share.
No, and it definitely wasn't the easiest process, but I think it's been a very fulfilling process. I think I am very vulnerable in my book. There's a lot of stories, a lot of chapters that are pretty deep. And, I think something that I was taught one time when I walked through a really hard moment in my life was the first step of healing starts when you can acknowledge that you actually have some healing to do. And I just hope that this book is impactful to my readers, that it inspires them to go and chase their own personal life purpose and to go and live out that purpose with the utmost confidence.
You also speak about insecurities and fears that you're quite open about. What advice do you give to people that are struggling with that self-worth and also those defining labels that unfortunately society gives us?
I think focusing so much on self-confidence was one of the biggest pitfalls in my life, because confidence really just means to have full trust, and if I say I have self-confidence, it means I have full trust in myself. And man, I don't know about you, but at one point or another, probably sooner rather than later, I will let myself down. I got to a moment in my life where I realized I don't need self-confidence, because I get to have something way better than that, and that is to replace that word self and replace it with God confidence, because then I get to have confidence in who my maker is, who he created me to be, and the perfect plan and purpose that he has for my life.
I think you touched on very nicely how your faith has influenced a lot of your comebacks and your setbacks, but also a lot of the things that you do. How do you explore the idea of digging into falsehoods that hold us back? What are some of those falsehoods that especially also young women kind of hang on to and need to challenge?
I think fitting in is so much rooted in fear. The fear of feeling like we are not enough, the fear of not fitting in the first place. But when you think of the word belonging is rooted in love. It's rooted in being fully known, fully loved, regardless of our ups, our downs, by people who love us, who want the best for us, and who truly have our best interests at heart. And so I would just say, if that's something that you're struggling with, don't be focused on trying to fit in, rather be focused on belonging.
What lasting impact do you hope that readers of A Crown That Lasts will have, especially when it comes to embracing their truest identity? And also, it's a book of faith, so don't expect there not to be a tale of faith in this book as well.
It's such a big part of my life story. It's such a big part of what has enabled me to have the platform that I have. The love for people that I have has been inspired by my faith, essentially by the way that Jesus has loved us first. So yes, my book is definitely full of scripture, full of biblical truths that I apply to stories in my own life. And so something that I was really intentional about was I wanted this book to be applicable and impactful to my readers. So I've divided it into 4 main sections: dig, plant, grow, and flourish. So be ready, because in this book we are going to be digging up the roots of our identity. We're going to be planting new seeds of truth in our life, and we're going to allow those seeds to eventually grow, to get to a time in our life where we can flourish.
There she is, philanthropist, entrepreneur, speaker, model, and Miss Universe 2017, and now also author Demi-Leigh Tebow, chatting to me at her book launch in Sandton City.
You're listening to the Sandton Times Hour.
As we get into the final minutes of this week's show, I'm excited to be reconnecting with someone I last worked with 20 years ago in talk radio. He is veteran broadcaster Tom London, who became the center of a nationwide crowdfunding effort after sharing his harrowing experience at Helen Joseph Hospital in Johannesburg. And what started as a chest cold escalated quite dramatically into pneumonia, leading to hospitalization. And after several days at Helen Joseph Hospital, Tom documented the poor treatment and conditions he faced through a viral video, which sparked widespread concern. And I think most people have seen it or heard about it. If you haven't, I don't know where you've been. And his experience obviously drew a lot of attention to what was going on in public hospitals and inspired a movement for healthcare reform, for encouraging South Africans to speak up, advocating, and of course holding those in whatever power they are accountable. And his story, I think, certainly resonated deeply with a lot of South Africans, and leading to the outcry that we now know. And Tom managed to check himself out of Helen Joseph Hospital and into a private hospital in Sandton, where he continues his treatment. And Tom, it's good to chat to you again.
Nice to speak to you too, Alex. It's been a long time since we worked together. It's good. It's good to be with you. By the way, this is my last media interview, at least for now. I've done so many. I'm mediated out, and I decided after I do the interview with Alex, bit of a break and focus in on getting better, because instead of lying here and recuperating, all I've done is media interview after media interview for the last 7 days.
Well, look, it's certainly been a run, and I think it's Vladimir Lenin who said there are decades where nothing happens and then there are weeks where decades happen. And Tom, it's been one of those decade weeks for you, I'd say.
It's been crazy. I spent 13 days at Helen Joseph where I was just trying to survive, trying to get some sleep, because it's impossible to sleep in that hospital. That was the first 13 days. And then I got to the private hospital and I thought, well, at least I got a comfortable bed, I can go to sleep. And then, man, the media, I didn't realize my video caused such a storm. Didn't realize that the media had picked up on it, that it had become national conversation. And then I just couldn't say no. Next couple of weeks, I'm going to focus on taking it easy as opposed to focus of the media's attention. Let me put it that way. Yeah.
So, Tom, it's very interesting because it's played out as a tale of two countries. On the one hand, obviously, the highlight of what happened to you in public hospitals. But at the same time, it also highlighted the unthinkable cost of private healthcare at the same time, which is where you find yourself right now.
It's an amazing situation. And it's full of ironies and intricacies. If you take a look at Helen Joseph, that hospital has probably all the facilities and machinery that a private hospital has. It's got CT scans, it's got x-rays, it's got a huge lab, it's got all the equipment. So it's not lacking anything. Yet it doesn't function properly. Everything is slow. There's no efficiency. The staff treat patients badly. So, there are huge areas that need to be improved to bring it up to a standard that's acceptable to humanity. And then you get to private healthcare, it's like checking in at a hotel. The rooms are beautiful, the mattresses are great, there's a bath, the water's hot, the food is nice. You get a menu every day and you get to order. You want a frittata for breakfast, or an omelette, or mince on toast. And it's like, wow, it's night and day. But if you want this kind of healthcare without a medical aid, you pay for it, and the prices are exorbitant. So everyone thinks this is a poor people problem, and I think that that's wrong. I've got a friend; she earns almost R1 million a year, right? Which is probably the top 1% in this country. But she's got to pay her kids' school fees. She's got to pay the bond on the house. She's got to pay insurance policies. She's got to buy food. She's got to pay the car repayment. She's got to put diesel in the car. By the time she gets to the end of that taxable salary, there's very little left for medical aid. She's spending $14,000 a month for her and her 2 children on medical aid. Now, some people are in that position where they're now having to cancel their medical aids. So this often gets presented as a problem. Actually, 67% of South Africans can't afford medical aid. What is our unemployment rate? 30-40%? That shows you that there's a huge portion of the employed in South Africa that cannot afford medical aid. And I guarantee you, if they walk into a private institution that I'm in, they can't afford the 500,000-600,000 rand that you need to deal with, that you need to hand over to get treatment in a private healthcare facility. So, we've got to be careful of painting this story and picture as one of the people who are battling. It's their problem. I think if you're between 20,000 rand a month and R1 million a year, you could very soon find yourself in the same situation I'm in.
Well, if you look at some of these costs, it's extraordinary. Even if you had to try and pay some of those things cash, it is just the bills are just remarkable. Even the easiest of procedures ends up costing you hundreds of thousands, which is just unthinkable for pretty much everyone I know, at least.
I'm being facetious here, but my advice, if you don't have a medical aid and you're earning money and you want to know how much money you need to keep aside in case you need to get into a hospital, I'd say put R1 million aside in a savings account.
Sure. Well, there you have it. Tommy, things have played out the way they've played out because your video kicked up a storm. It caught the attention of a lot of people, obviously the media, and so it goes. What would have happened if it hadn't gone the way it did?
I would have had to turn the car around and gone back to casualty at Helen Joseph, spent another 3 days on the floor, and try to get back into the ward that I ran away from.
Yeah. Well, look, you've also highlighted as well in all the interviews you've done and all the conversations that have been had around this, that this is, you've become the de facto poster child of what's going on in the healthcare system, and that there's many people just like you who haven't had the same sort of exposure or media interviews going through this every single day in all kinds of different hospitals. You know, it's almost like this responsibility has almost been thrust upon you, and you have been outspoken as well in terms of that this is something that you're also wanting to pursue after you've made your recovery, and something that you want to sort of hopefully champion as well.
Well, you know, I had a bit of a meltdown last night and cried because I've got probably 200 people a day calling me saying I've got a grandfather sitting in a wheelchair at this hospital, they haven't attended to him, or, you know, it's one tragic story after another. And I'm lying here trying to get better. And at the same time, I've got this barrage of, you know, desperation coming at me. And so, you know, I feel obligated to do something about it. Yesterday, I had a bit of a meltdown and said, hey, can you just leave me alone for a few days so that I can get myself right? Because I'm fighting for my life here. But the desperation that's inside people's hearts at the moment, with family members in state institutions that aren't getting the proper treatment or the care, it's just mind-blowing. I don't know how I'm going to do it because the scale of this problem is massive. It's not just, you know, one or two people. Literally thousands of people need my help. And I don't know how I help thousands of people. So, you know, I have sleepless nights in this hospital bed trying to work out, do I start an MPO and how would it be structured? What would the services be? It was like trying to figure out how do we fix this problem? I haven't got the solution yet, but you know, I'm going to sit with people with clever minds and brains and see if I can do something, A, to pay back because I've been blessed here, but B, this is not a Tom London problem. I mean, I'm not the only guy that got treated like this or has experienced this. There's thousands and thousands of other people going through this on a daily basis. Somehow we've got to do something. Yeah, I've become the poster child. I didn't mean to become the poster child, but it's been put on my shoulders, this responsibility. You know, all I can say is I'm going to try my best to find a solution to try and alleviate the problems that people are seeing in state healthcare. It's a massive challenge. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm going to give it my best shot.
Well, right now, all we can wish you is a speedy recovery, and wishing you all the best with the operation as well. And you also hosted a nightly online stream for quite a few months called the Tom London Show on the Tom London Show Facebook page, and we hope to see you back there again as well, stronger than before. And Tom, thank you so much for making the time and taking the energy to be on the Sandton Times Hour.
Thank you for your good wishes. As I said, this is my last interview for a while, and I'm glad it was you, how we've come circle.
Well, speedy recovery, Tom. And with that, we have to wrap it up for this week on the Sandton Times Hour. As always, available on all good podcast platforms, be it Apple, Amazon, Spotify, Podcast Party, AfroPods, Jollof Radio, you name it. It's all on there. Go check it out online and subscribe. And, of course, you can also email editor@sandtontimes.co.za if you want to get in touch with your thoughts, your comments, your feedback, your ideas. Also connect on social media @Sandton Times, and also hop onto the website www.sandtontimes.co.za. We've got a fun competition that we're running at the moment. Go have a look. Maybe you get lucky. Thank you to all our guests for this week, and of course to the team that makes this happen every single week and makes this possible and is holding up the fort. And thank you for listening. And let's do it all again next week.
That's it for this week. Thanks for listening to the Sandton Times Hour. And if you enjoyed it, be sure to share it.